Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this Wheaton Conversation with Richard Robinson Jr. and Ira L. Bond. I am Pamela Weichman, and I am your host, as well as the Director of Education and Artist Services at WheatonArts. I am a white female in my 30s with long brown hair and blue eyes, and I am wearing a pink sweater. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm broadcasting from southern New Jersey, which I recognize as the land of the Lenni Lenape. Wheaton Arts is presented by PNC Arts Alive, the United Nations International Year of Glass, and the Art Alliance for Contemporary Glass. We thank them for their support. Through membership, donations, and shop at shopwheatonarts.org, you can also show your support. Please consider exploring these options so we can continue to offer free programs like this. It is my pleasure to introduce my co-host for this program, Dr. Iveta Pirgova. Dr. Pirgova is the director of the Department of Life and Cultural Studies at Wheaton Arts Cultural Center. Over the years, Iveta has worked with more than 65 ethnic and regional communities in New Jersey, striving to preserve and share their cultural heritage. With a primary interest in cultural expression of ethnicity and identity, she has designed a series of education public programs, including more than 30 major exhibitions, various festivals, performances, workshops, classes, and artist residencies in folk and traditional arts. Iveta, thank you for joining us and for leading our conversation.
Thank you, Pam. That was a nice introduction. I didn't know I was such a nice person.
You're fantastic.
Thank you very much. It is my great pleasure to introduce our presenters today. I mean, we're so lucky to have both of them tonight to speak about this extremely interesting and meaningful topic. So I will present first Richard. Richard Robinson of Woodbury, New Jersey, originally began his professional career in the communications industry and has a BA in communications from Penn State University. But his 35-year passion for music and cultural traditions led him to pursue employment in the arts. As a result, he has been working in the field for more than 15 years, including 5 years at the Arts Council of Princeton and West Windsor Arts Council. In addition to his experience in arts management, Richard is also an accomplished teaching artist who focuses on cultural enrichment, providing an enthusiastic and fresh perspective to the field of education. As an educator and musician, Richard's work is an outgrowth of an African and Caribbean folk arts movement in New Jersey and Philadelphia. Richard had many teachers in African drumming and masquerade, including Kofi Jimariah, Clarence Anderson, Van Williams, and Andre Forrest, who all studied in West Africa before coming back to teach in Philadelphia and New Jersey area. Richard is a master drummer who has played with the Akara Jet Drums and other bands and is an active member of the Philadelphia Performing Arts and the African Masquerade Society. Welcome, Richard.
Hi, everybody.
Now it is my great pleasure to introduce Ira Bond. Ira Bond, Ibrahim Diabate, is a performer, dancer, percussionist, educator, researcher, community activist, masquerade specialist, musician, and cultural enrichment specialist for 30 years. Ira's cultural, artistic, and educational mission is to utilize arts as a means to develop positive relationship and to reintroduce African cultural values to the African diaspora in our area. In his work as an educator, Ira emphasizes the development of the socialization process, the rites of passage, and the creativity associated with traditional arts that can transform people to a higher realization of their life's purpose. Ira has earned his BA in communications with a minor in African American Studies from Mansfield University, earning a master in education in multicultural education from Eastern University, Pennsylvania. His thesis was teaching content through the arts. His interest in traditional cultures led him to Antioch University to earn an honorary certificate in Malayan arts and culture with concentrations in French, Bamana intensive, traditional Malayan aesthetic, and a traditional apprenticeship with the National Ballet of Mali. Ira is the lead drummer for Messiah Dance Works of Philadelphia and the Afro-Cuban dance company Gulumele. Ira is also the founder and director of the Philadelphia Performing Arts Ensemble that serves to create a bridge between African migrant and African American communities through traditional song, dance, music, and masquerade. African masquerade is Ira's specialty. Welcome, Ira.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Awesome. All right. Okay. Again, my name is Ira Bond, and I'm here with my colleague and probably say my best friend, one of my best friends in the planet, Richard Robinson Jr. And today our presentation is visualizing ancestral connections. And so, as that was a beautiful introduction. Thank you, Dr. Yvette. We appreciate that. Today, what we were thinking of talking about is these are some of the subjects we were talking about. First, the African Masquerade Society, Philadelphia Performing Arts, and then we would kind of like talk about our expertise, like where are the roots of some of the masks that we adorn, and how did we come across these different traditions. And then when you talk about masks in West Africa or of the African diaspora, it's always very important to talk about the context, the cultural context of secret societies. So we wanted to talk about that in the diaspora. Mask and spirit, because it's a very spiritual art form. The music, so that you know some of the traditions of music that accompany masks. And then we have 3 specific masks that we wanted to kind of dive into and just talk about those traditions. And then we have questions. All right, Brother Rich.
Okay, so Ira and I are part of a offshoot of a gentleman that's in the far left corner by the name of Arthur Hall. He was the director and founder of the Arthur Hall Drummers and Dancers of Philadelphia, which was based in North Philadelphia off of 10th and Germantown. And it housed several functions. One as an art center, other also as a consider a touring dance company of African drum and dance, and actually and modern dance as well. Many of the dancers and drummers that you see in Philadelphia come strictly from out of this particular person, and that company has a name. They're internationally known. You can look them up in the Arthur Hall collection. But specifically, the person that's in the middle, the gentleman in the middle, his name was Kofi Jemirai. He passed away a few years ago, but he came to our school when we were in high school some years ago. We won't say too many, but in 1989, he came to our school as an artist in resident, which was Martin Luther King High School, which is the building that's at the bottom. And he created a artist in residency program for 6 to 7 years straight. And Ira and I happened to be under his tutelage, under another directress. Her name was Miss Evelyn Scott. And she basically gave him free reign of showing us how to do African masquerades, drumming, and as well as dancing, all in our high school curriculum, as well as in after school. And then out of that, above the Martin Luther King High School picture, you see the Masquerade Society. Originally, the Masquerade Society started out with 3 members, and then it grew from out of the recruitment of being at Martin Luther King High School. So Kofi Arthur Driscoll Jemirai was the founder and director of the Masquerade Society, and then we just evolved from them. From under his tutelage, we learned so much about masquerades from different disciplines in different parts of West Africa. Go ahead, Ira, you can.
Yeah, and also in the picture, you're going to see next to the mask in the upper right-hand corner, Brother Bratis Wallace and Terrell. Those gentlemen have also grown up in the culture, have also been a part of this tradition, and also extend the African Masquerade Society. We would be remiss if we didn't remember or think about another one of our elders who is also a member of the Mass Society, Baba Aziz from Washington, D.C. area, who
And he's rich
go
in New
ahead.
York too. New York
Yeah,
too.
and New York as well. I mean, there were a lot of folks as we came up in African Masquerade that contributed to our knowledge of and understanding of Africa and its diaspora. We in Rich's bio, we talked about Van Williams. There were several people, but like Rich was saying, our primary teacher was Kofi Arthur Driscoll, who you see in the center.
And really quick, because it's so much of a generational thing, brother Terrell, when I was 8 years old, I saw his grandfather perform with a group called Afro One from Willingboro, New Jersey. So I saw them. So I saw drums and dance earlier. My cousin was a part of that particular company when I was a young guy. So and Baba Joe Bryant is his name as well. He happened to be the first drummer I actually saw. So
yeah, and then Spunky is Batista's father, who is also you know, been involved with drumming forever, and also African Mask. In my bio, we talked about the fact that I did get a chance to go to Mali in 2007 and spend a year with Antioch University's program. The program was Arts and Culture in Mali, West Africa. So going to Mali, I mean, like we just mentioned, we had been drumming. I had been kind of like involved in African mask and music and culture. But for me, in my artistic plight, when I got a chance to go to Mali for that year, it really helped to solidify and also to just bring a lot of just give me another level of understanding for the art form. I was able to perform and present with the National Ballet of Mali. I was able to travel to different villages, including the village of the Dogon people, which we'll talk about, some Bamana villages. All of these places had specific traditions. And when Mali became independent, you know, they created a national ballet like many other countries had done. And in that, they would teach traditions from other ethnic groups of different people from the country. So in Mali, like I said, they mentioned the Bamana people or the Dogon people or the Koroboro people, and all of their dances would be represented by the National Ballet. And that's who I had the privilege and honor to be able to study with. Once I got that information, I just was like, wow, I want to combine what I've learned in Mali and also my experience as a Philadelphia traditional African artist. Thus, we had the idea of Maladelphia. And when we started our program, you heard some of that Maladelphia sound, where it's not totally West African, but it also has like some elements of our African American identity and incorporated in what we do. So that's Maladelphia. This summer, we're going to have some performances, and please make sure you look us up and check that out. So I thought this would be important to show. This is a map of West Africa. We have spaces like you can see from the left side, Senegal, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Guinea. The large one in the middle is Mali. We have Cote d'Ivoire, Liberia, Burkina Faso, Ghana. Our tradition in terms of masks come from a couple of different locations. We've traveled to Mali, we've traveled to Ivory Coast, we've traveled to Senegal, to Ghana, and many of our traditions of masks may come from Nigeria by way of Cuba. And a little bit later, I know Rich is going to be able to talk a lot about the egungun and different masks that come to us through Cuba from Nigeria. But I thought it might be a good visual for us to look at the different spaces. Each one of these countries has a different mask tradition, and each country actually has hundreds of mask traditions depending on the village and also dependent upon the ethnicity or the group of people. For instance, in Cote d'Ivoire, they have the guru, or, you know, in Ghana, they have the Ashanti. In Guinea, they may have the Baga. All of these different people have different mass traditions.
So we have two different slides up. We have the men's initiation and the women's initiation. Both men and women roles in traditional societies or in Africa, totally different. Men tend to take care of a lot of the sometimes injustices that happen. So they may use the mask then. There's other masks that are used or initiated into for agricultural, which Ira and I will talk about later. There's other ones that are for women as well, where this just for the women. They only see that maybe once a year, where the men may only see it more than once a year. So the initiation process is totally different. It's dealing with seniority. A lot of the younger, obviously the younger generation doesn't know what the older generation are, and they're just passing that information on in an endless cycle.
I would also say these different societies, in order to adorn the mask or to wear the mask, you have to be initiated. It's not like what you might think of in America, where anybody can just grab a mask and put it on for a Halloween or a masquerade party. The masks have a very sacred connotation and symbolism with them, and we're going to talk about what they actually mean. But if you are part of a women's initiation, like in order to become a woman or to become a man, a lot of times there's certain tests that you have to do, and a certain folks that have passed that test have the privilege of wearing a mask, and that comes through initiation.
Or also, if they don't go on to, even though they pass the test, they also are considered a man or a woman in terms of maturity. So if you didn't pass the test in any of the initiations, you're not you're not a man. You're not a woman. So
yeah. So in terms of spirituality, some of you may have heard of libations, like African libations, where they pour water. I thought this might be an appropriate a visual to look at, a symbolic way in which we give respect and honor to our ancestors. And ancestors are very important in African diasporic cultures. It's not about ancestral worship, even though a lot of people may, spin it like that. But really, it's about ancestral acknowledgement. So the mask can represent a lot of different things, but one of the major things that they represent is ancestors. Ancestors are very much respected in cultural spaces of African diaspora. Rich, you want to talk about the other one?
well, in terms of Nigeria and by way of Cuba, you have a particular mask that we use in our repertoire called egungun. Egungun means ancestor in Yoruba. Yoruba people spread throughout Nigeria, but there's a lot of majority of Cubans, Afro-Cubans are Yoruba. They were brought over by the transatlantic slave trade, and they brought those traditions there. And the egungun dons a particular person's family member or someone in the community who represents a high regard and a high honor. And they bring those out during egungun festivals, which happen to be majority of the time is in America would be the summertime or the springtime. They bring them out, they bring them into the community, they dance them in the street with drums called bata or anya, or talking drums sometimes are accompanied. And some of them are royal, some of them go back to kings and queens who have, or royal court people who have passed on, and they created a masquerade for those particular people. And the egunguns kind of like make folks happy. They give them, saying, wow, this particular person, we remember all the stories and the things that they have. And then also it brings justice too. So that remembers that, well, at the same time, given a person that they may be going through a negative situation, they see a gunkum coming, they can bring a much more positive energy for the persons that the Egungun don. There's many stories that go with it. Each panel tells a story on the particular mask, and yeah.
Yeah, no, you were mentioning about some of the instruments, and I thought that was really like powerful.
Okay.
A lot of times people think about drums and Africa and its drums, and it's true. And all music, the bass, the drum is the heartbeat. It's the part of the music that gives you that pulse. And but there are other instruments as well in Africa. But just looking at this particular slide, it represents some of, not even all, but this is just a handful of percussion traditions that are done throughout West Africa. The most popular being, of course, the one on the left, on my left, I guess your left too, this is the djembe. You can see it's an hourglass shaped drum. That's probably the most popular drum in the world right now, hand percussion drum. That particular drum. Then you have the doom doom drum, which is right next to that, which accompanies the djembe. We have right next to that, these are called sabar drums, which drums actually are used with a stick, you know, very loud drums, but awesome drums. They come from Senegal. So the djembe and the doom dooms are mainly played like in Mali. You have Ivory Coast, Liberia. The sabar is more Senegal. Rich will talk about the kora in a second, which is that string instrument on the right, to total right. We have, if you go down, you have the balafon, not the xylophone, but the balafon, which is, you know, an instrument that's played also with percussion. We have the bata. Actually, these bata drums are from Cuba, but you'll see the same drum by way of the African diaspora well, the original version of that is from Nigeria. It's also called bata. And then you have the Ghanaian drums, the yeah, those awesome drums. All of these drums talk, which goes to the last drum, which they call the talking drum. But in actuality, all of these drums talk. All of them are played for specific purposes. And if you have a mask, there's certain rhythms that are only played for certain masks. So you have to know which rhythm and which call connects to which mask, which tradition. Is very specific. It's not like drum circle, not taken away from drum circle, but when we talk about traditional African music and culture, it's very specific and it's connected to specific traditions.
And also, when Ira was mentioning the talking drum, even though the djembe is popular around the world, the talking drum, which is the hourglass shaped drum with a stick next to it down on the bottom right above the kora, which is the 21 string harp, that drum goes from Benin all the way up to Senegal, and it changes shape, but it changes sizes and shapes, but it also specifically is one of the oldest ones out of all of those drums. And it does manipulate, and each ethnic group that plays that drum use their voices on it. So there's not just one universal voice. They use their own voicing on that particular drum. Right. So that drum is the first drum. As I tell the younger people in my classes, that's the drum that's the first cell phone. That's the drum that you let people know that you're getting married or you're courting somebody or somebody's having a baby. And again, those drums also accompany egunguns, ancestral masquerades that I just mentioned. And then, yeah.
Rich, you want to talk about the kora real quick?
Okay.
You know, and then we can go, I think our next slide is talking about
the kora is a 21 string harp. It's the only looped harp.
That's the instrument. It's like these red dots that's above it. That's the kora right there.
And it's it's next to the sabar drums, which is right in the corner. That's a 21 string harp. Currently, right now, there's about 72 generations of living right now kora players in West Africa, in America. This harp actually is played in the court for kings and queens. The National Company of Mali consider that its like bass instrument. This instrument is typically played or given to father to son. So there's an apprenticeship between father to son. Now it's a little bit more wide open because it's just more wide open now. The body of the harp itself is made of a calabash. The neck itself is made of the wood that the djembe and the dunzuns are made of. And
Rich, I hate to stop you. I'm wondering, do you have a kora near you?
yeah, but it might not sound too loud.
No, you don't have to play it. I mean, since you were talking about the different parts of it.
Okay. All right. So this part right here is the calabash.
Yeah. Can everybody see Rich? Yep.
All right. Good. This is the calabash.
Right.
Right here is a goat skin. And this is a bridge right here. So the makers stretch the skin on first, and then they put the handles on. Then they put a neck on. There's 21 strings. Each of the strings, and representation-wise, the kora is a mother. So each of the strings are the babies. The body is the mama's belly and her heart. And it's played with. Sorry, I got a pen in my hand. Your index and thumb. This is not a traditional one. This is a newer style of kora that I play. But traditionally, this has braided cow skin on it, and then each one is tuned all the way up. And this kora right now is tuned in the key of F, called sutta. And then I could drop it down one more just by one note, and it becomes siliba. But universally, this kora can play with any Western instrument. There's hundreds of songs that go with it in the repertoire of kora. There's a good kora player by the name of Tumani Jibate, who played with many different jazz artists like Herbie Hancock, and then some flamenco musicians. Just look Tumani Jibate up. Very good kora player. Herbie Hancock had a kora player. Stevie Wonder had a kora player. Miles Davis didn't get into it, but Eric Cherry from his Don Cherry from his fusion bands, he delved into kora with it, with the kora, as well as Sun Ra. Sun Ra Orchestra actually still uses a kora in that band to this day. So this is a 21 string harp. They play this in the court, and it's accompanied with the balafon. The balafon was the other xylophone that Ira mentioned. They're together. There's family lineages that go with it. So depending on the family name, the instrument is played. So this is the kora.
Awesome.
And can you tell us who made this instrument?
This instrument was made by Fode Sissoko's nephew in Consacrine, Senegal. And Fode Sissoko is one of our collaborators. He lives in California right now, but his nephew is his main kora maker. So I got that from Fode Sissoko. And if anybody is interested in getting his style of kora, just email me at drumteacher215@gmail.com.
Well, I asked just because you mentioned before that you made some of the instruments that we can see.
Well, the funny story, that particular one, I was in a band and I had a kora that was playing, that looked good, sounded great, but didn't look good. And some guys put out some Fender, like $3,000 Fender guitars, and I felt bad. So I wound up buying a really nice kora so I can feel, like I'm up to par with those guys. So.
That is nice. I mean, because from what I know, you can make you and Ira, you can make the instruments and the masks and the garments that go with the masks and all that. So yes. I just wanted our participants to know that you are an artist, kind of in many different things that are all incorporated later on into the masquerade.
Oh, yes. I'm also an instrument maker. in the picture, in the introductory picture, that drum that I was playing, I made that for the Sunrise Orchestra, which was a project with Philadelphia the Horticultural Society, which is a 5-year project that we had reforested in Philadelphia, and they wanted drums to come out and play every time they planted. And one of the culminating performances was to play with the Sunrise Orchestra with that particular drum. So that was really cool.
Yeah, it is cool. But I would like to ask you the golden question as to why. I mean, what is it that personally motivates you to be involved in the masquerade?
The why.
I mean, if you just want to share some personal view, because you talked a lot about it.
You know, for me, the why, the deeper why is because of, you know, the onslaught of Black arts in America, seeing things grow, like that from the African American History Museum, and then my father showing me some different things, and being exposed to stuff pretty early, in terms of Black arts in America. That's the older me, but the younger me, when I first started, my friends were doing it. The teacher seemed cool. There was this like great connection between an older generation and a younger generation, and we met together. He introduced us to his music from the 60s. We introduced him to hip hop. We had this like bond together that was kind of cool. Our families were involved. So that's the bigger picture for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. For me, is everything that Rich just mentioned. And then also like identity development. I feel like because we were introduced to socially conscious people at early ages who, even, you know, as Africans in America or African Americans, they really respected their cultural heritage as it related to Africa. And, you know, for so long, you know, people of African descent would deny their African identities. And we were like taught very differently. We were taught to respect it, to love it. And we were able to see the beauty of it at an early age. And to be entrusted with something so sacred as the masquerade tradition wasn't something that, it was something that was fun, it was creative, but it also was a big responsibility that we really took to heart. And I feel like even today, like in terms of one of the reasons why we keep doing it and we continue this tradition is because it is in the hopes that people will like reimagine who they are and their identity as it relates to their African heritage for people of African descent. And then for people who might not be of African descent, for them to really understand the beauty of the continent, you know, and the accessibility of it, and and to break down some of the myths that people have about what, you know, what Africa is. I mean, even today, people will envision Africa as a poor place without any real culture or value or cultural significance or contribution. And so by us being able to celebrate Africa in this way, we dispel all of those myths and we help people to see Africa for what it really is, you know?
Well, that is very, very important. Thank you so much, Ira and Richard. These are very important things, and people should take some time to think about this, regardless of whether they would be of African descent or not, and how they relate to the meanings and stories that you're sharing with us tonight. But meanwhile, while we were talking, we had 2 questions, so I'll read them to you. Michael would like to know what similarities and differences exist between West African masquerade and Caribbean masquerade.
Awesome.
Oh, great question.
You want to take that one?
Well, the one thing that's the most important part is that it's the root, right? And the root was Africa. But then those particular people who do the transatlantic slave trade, remember, America wasn't the only place where the transatlantic slave trade went to, all right? So you have the Caribbean with its colony, with its being colonies, and those particular European powers having brought those particular people over from West Africa, because the majority of them were coming from West Africa. A lot of them were Bantu people, a lot of them were Manding, and a lot of them were Wolof as well. And the one thing they did was they all integrated together. And those particular people, even African Americans and Caribbean people, have a hybrid sensibility of culturalism, meaning that they still practiced or did their masquerades in the Caribbean, but added a little flavor to it, added their little spices to it.
All right, and the next question is from Lydia, and she's asking, how are you passing this tradition down to our youths? And what would you need to expose more young men to their heritage?
Okay, I got that one. I was actually going to say, in terms of the Assassier, and I'm not going to get deep into it, but if you see this particular picture, this is how it's represented in West Africa. But if you go into places like Trinidad and Tobago, or in Haiti or Cuba, they will call it the Moko Jumbe. And the Moko Jumbe mask is the mask that stands on stilts as well. But you might see a different adornment of the costume or the clothing, but the root of it and the symbolism of it still kind of remains the same in terms of it representing a spirit. And we'll talk about what that represents. I'm actually we're both educators. I'm at Imhotep Charter School. I'm the associate principal there. And we really it's an African-centered charter school. So one of the things we do is we try to promote African-centered cultural awareness mentality through a value system that promotes a lot of the things that we're talking about. We also have a studio, Philadelphia studio, where we have drum classes, and we also train young people to be able to learn about some of these traditions that we're talking about.
So some of these things are incorporated in the school curriculum?
Yeah, we have drum class.
Wonderful.
We have drum class. We have cultural celebrations, and we do work with young people. Yes.
And I work for West Philadelphia Achievement Charter Elementary School. I'm a music teacher there. So we do pretty much the same stuff that Ira was talking about. We try to, do a lot of cultural infusion in the classroom, outside of the classroom, of my classroom, meaning the music class. And then we just try to keep up with the cultures and norms of making sure that the children understand that there's their cultural heritage. And like Ira said, we teach private classes on different things like that. So we have that, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, if you want, would you like to continue, and we can have some more questions at the end?
Sure. I thought, so this part is going to be a little bit different and fun. We're going to actually introduce a couple of the masks that we adorn and we work with. One of the most powerful ones that we have worked with and worked around is the Ivory Coast mask of the Assassier. And usually these mask dancers, they oversee and bring blessings to festivities. They're considered, some people call them the Chakaba, but they're the protector of the children. They see above and beyond the trees and the houses to protect the village from negativity or from danger. And remember, again, these are sacred masks, so usually you will not know the identity of the people who adorn these masks, because their identity is that ancestral spirit. It is that spirit of the trees or the spirit of nature. And so the person that's behind the mask is not important, but it is more or less a vessel for the mask to be able to do its work. Yeah, let's watch a little bit of the mask of the Assassier in the Ivory Coast. All right, that was the Assassier from the Ivory Coast. The Bamana mask of the Chihuahua is also a powerful mask. This mask is actually from Mali, West Africa. You know, many places in West Africa are primarily agricultural. And so these, if you look very carefully, you can see the gazelles. So there's a male gazelle, and then there's a female with a baby on the back of the gazelle. And these gazelles, basically half antelope, half human. And they basically, the story is that, you know, whenever there's a good harvest, there's a celebration, no matter what. Most of the celebrations, you're going to have feasts, and you're going to have masquerades and drummers and people doing the celebration. And that's one of the reasons why this particular mask will be presented. This is Kulumele. Kulumele did a piece myself with Kulumele where we actually did the Chihuahua mask. I believe this might have been in 2008. Let's look at Kulumele's presentation of the Chihuahua. And then the third one that we wanted to introduce, this one, I love this one. It's called the Zawuli. And the Zawuli mask has become very, very popular. I heard
Very viral. It's viral too.
Exactly. I think because people say it's like the most impossible, one of the most impossible folk dances. And the Zawali mask is actually done by the Guru people of the Ivory Coast. And there's a competition associated with the Zawali that because the feet of the Zawali are so exact with the drum, it's actually codified language that happens with the Zawali mask. And the Zawali represents this beautiful, beautiful girl. And she was just an awesome dancer, And so it was one of those, like when you have someone that is proud and able to create choreography, they're celebrated because of their prestige in the village. And so this is the Zawali. This is an example. You can find many examples of Zawali online, but I like this one. And that's the Zawali dance from the Ivory Coast. If you hear like the the flutes in the background. Yeah, they have those are specific only to the Guru people of the Ivory Coast. They play along with the drums, and they have a whole nother. We actually didn't bring the talk about those drums. They have a different kind of set of drums that they use, but those flutes add a very distinct characteristic to the sound of to the Zawali sound. It's really powerful. I'm wondering, Rich, if anyone has any questions.
Yeah.
Yes, I wanted to read the question that came from Eleanor.
Okay.
She wanted to ask, who does the training to teach the dances? Does anyone come from the Ivory Coast, for example, to teach, or maybe you have local teachers? How does it work?
Yeah. One of my when one of my major teachers, I actually had a chance to go to Ivory Coast. His name is Dr. Joby, Ivory Joby, and master musician, dancer. He's also from a guru village, and he comes like just about every year to Philadelphia to teach and to work with us. I got a chance to go to his village called Bangalo Fla, and very rural village, but the culture was very powerful and very just loved it. And you know, one of the things you mentioned, Iveta, is like just in terms of like the masquerade clothing, you know, it is really beautiful. It takes a lot of work. It's just beautiful, but things are done a certain way. Things are created a certain way. And everything that you see on the different masks that you may see have some type of symbolic meaning, right? So there's nothing there just because I mean, there are things there that because it looks good, but then there's also other symbolisms there. Sometimes there are talismans or um, like charms of
Symbols.
luck. I don't know if you or blessings that are attached to certain places. You know, some masks there is taboo to touch. There's other masks where people try to touch them because they want to get the blessing. So it just depends.
And that's one thing that and even with Zawuli, even with Egunguns and different they have a keeper, a person that you're not allowed to touch them. They'll push you away. Some videos you may see a guy with a stick, you know, and he's just trying to keep the crowds away from touching them or anything like that. So and it's all relative so that the person doesn't get hurt, but also that you know it's a sacred entity that's being done.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, she also wants to know who taught you the dances, or were the dances just passed down through from tradition by people observing? And also, if you can tell us a few words about the symbolic meaning of the masks.
Okay.
Well, go ahead.
So I mean, you know, we've pretty much have been involved in these cultural traditions for like over maybe 35, almost 40 years. So like we talked about our first teachers and some of our first experiences as like young children. And then through the years, we've had many different like master teachers from both as African Americans, as Africans from the continent, and also masters from the Caribbean, from places like Cuba and Haiti, you know, in Brazil, you know, in Brazil as well. Like we've at one of the advantages of being who we are in this space is that we were able to have a variety of teachers from a variety of traditions that could give us a high level of competency because of who we are and you know their ability to trust us with the information. So it's a lived experience now. It's not like a class experience for us. You know, I don't know if that makes sense, but like you know, there's a space where you know you're like, okay, I take a class, but we are, I think we're very much like ingrained and entrenched in this tradition, as a part of our own identity, as a part of a historical legacy that, you know, Rich tried to talk a little bit about with Ile Ife, with like many ancestors from Philadelphia, and also, you know, really around the world. So I don't know, Rich, if that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I totally agree. And then the people that Ira mentioned, Ile Ife, Arthur Hall drummers and dancers in Philadelphia, those people high level, like Ira mentioned, and then they just passed it on, just like we're passing it on to the next generation. They did the exact same thing. We're just um that vessel that's doing the exact same thing that they showed us. So, but Ira's totally right.
Thank you. And maybe if the second part of her question is, what are some of the symbolic meaning of the masks?
Okay, so there's a mask that comes from the Baga people. There's so many different. One of the Baga masks that has no mouth, for instance. Then we talk about that when the mask can also teach lessons. You know, depending upon their purpose, you know, like for instance, if the mask doesn't have a mouth, maybe it's teaching us that we need to listen more. When you look at the Chihuahua, the one we just mentioned, let me see if I can go back to it. This particular mask, it teaches us not only about harvest, but what it teaches us is that when you work hard, you can receive some type of um of reward for your work, because when you know there's a good harvest, you don't just wake up and there's a harvest. You have to work, you have to plant the seed, you have to make sure that you know that the ground is fertile and that there's no weeds and things like that. And so there are lessons that are ingrained about life in the masks that are really important, because you don't have to always talk about it, but the mask can show you and remind you what those things are. And that's what they can teach you. So like yeah, I don't know if that's a good example.
Yeah, this is a good example with the harvest mask, because in this case, harvest is understood in a very, very broad sense of the word, not just harvest of crops and fruits, but in
Right,
things that
right,
we try to achieve in life in general.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And then it also taught, I
yeah.
was gonna say the Chihuahua also taught the people how to harvest, like physically,
Mhm.
by the dance, by the way the dance
Mhm,
is
mhm.
done, physically show the people how to harvest, you
Exactly.
know, and everything.
Mhm.
Thank you very much. We have a couple more questions. Lily is asking, do your students have the opportunity to travel? Because you mentioned how you travel to different places learning traditions. So how about your students? Do they have this opportunity?
Yeah, actually, at our school, Imhotep Charter School, last year, we took students for 1 week in Ghana, West Africa. Um, they actually, because our school is a STEM school, science, technology, you know, mathematics school, engineering and mathematics school. They actually created water filters out of a 3D printing machine, and we went to Ghana to work with the people, to help them to talk about water quality. But then also the exchange was to learn more about the culture, to learn about the drumming, to learn about the libation, the ancestors, and also this connection that they have to their ancestors, because we are African. And actually, they're going to be going back to Ghana again. We're going back to Ghana again in a couple of months. So yeah, and then a couple of times, I mean, Rich has been to Puerto Rico. He's done more like the diaspora as the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, Brazil, Cuba, and like on my side, I've really kind of been in West Africa, but we all, you know, have our own kind of experiences So he could probably talk to you about some of those experiences he's had abroad with different folk.
Yeah.
Well, with our with the abroad situation for my students, they're still small, so we're looking at K through fifth, so they wouldn't be able to travel. But the two current students that I do have that are not really performing, but at a performance level, their families are open for them to travel. They will travel. I wouldn't doubt it in my mind that they give me a call saying they're moving in a certain way, which is so cool. For me, as Ira mentioned, I did go travel to Cuba a couple of years ago, stayed there, studied the music of Afro-Cuban music from in the Matanzas. And the style of music that I play is Ira L. It's the root of Bata music in the main voicing for Bata music in coming out of Cuba. And then those particular rhythms that I learned, especially for the Egungun, we play, which was very good because it gave me the opportunity to merge the two together when I did go, and bring that back and share the information with my fellow brothers that was in the Masquerade Society when I did come back. Puerto Rico, I just happened to have the opportunity with Kulamele a couple of years ago to travel with them over to Puerto Rico and work with the Zapetas family, which is the oldest Bomba y Plena family in on the island. They have their own school. They've been featured in many different lights, from Time Magazine to, I mean, their family lineage of drums goes on, and I happen to see and work with, and Ira work with them too. They have a masquerade that they use that's based out of a coconut that they brought that out during the course of the performance. So that was like a great opportunity. Brazil, we pretty much when I did go, we worked with a group called Ira, and Ira is a big samba school in Bahia, Brazil. Our sister city of Philadelphia, which I'm located right now, is Bahia. And we happen to be with
the Eagles are going to play there.
Yeah, the Eagles are playing. It's all because of and not because of it being because it's Brazil. The Eagles win. It's because of long hard work of people who here in Philadelphia making Brazil a home. A lot of Philadelphians live over there, but I happen to be in Bahia studying samba music, and over there, and we did a cultural exchange where we brought 15 djembe players from North America and their samba school, got their instrumentalists together, and we combined the two. It wasn't during Carnival, but it was during the time of the low season, so we were able to like really hunker down. But Ilea is an offshoot of they started in 1974, but they're an offshoot of studying about the Black Power movement in America, and they brought that information back, and they created Ilea. It means Ilea means house of light, and that was like a very cool exchange, and that gave me the opportunity to see how carnival samba schools like, and I'm not saying that Philadelphia and the Masquerade Society membership wasn't big, but this is like thousands of people in one neighborhood being affiliated with one big huge place for one goal, and that's to be a part of the carnival. And Ilea comes out similar to what masquerades do sometimes. They come out at about 3:30 in the morning. They're starting to come down on the main square where the judges and everybody are for carnival. And by the time they hit the judge's station, it should be about 5 o'clock in the morning. So they're actually bringing in, and they're saying Yoruba songs mixed with samba, and they're coming in right when the sun is coming up. And it's exactly how masquerades work. So it's kind of cool to have the opportunity to study with those guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I mean, this is really interesting, and it's good that you went off Carnival season because you might have not had time. It would be too
crazy. I would go as a tourist, but I wouldn't as an artist. It would have been too much.
Yeah, I understand. All right, so we have more questions. Kathleen is asking, how much do the drum rhythms vary from region to region?
I could talk about that. I'll talk about that because I see the next question. That's going to be you or you, Rich, after that.
The next one is a long one.
Yeah. So, yeah, if we go back, let me see. We talked briefly about some of these the different drums here. They even the tradition. I mean, we mentioned djembe, the djembe drum. Just talking about the djembe tradition, if you go to a Bamana village in Mali, and then you go to um, a village like in the north of Mali from to the south of Mali, they're two Bamana villages. They're going to sound differently. The music is going to be different. Okay. The what I and one of the things that I am a fan of in terms of djembe, and that's really the tradition that I kind of studied, is I'm a fan of, how can I say, drumming that djembe drumming that has very simplistic but effective and powerful phrasing. And there's other traditions of drumming where it's like really fast and like powerful pulsating. Myself, I'm very much into like a traditional style of djembe drum. And so the more contemporary djembe drum is tuned really high. And it's very, it can be very fast. Whereas the traditional village style, like they have something called D-da-D drumming that's in Bugani in Mali. It's a lot more mellow. It's a lot more rises and fallings in the music. There's a lot more singing in the music. There's a lot more, to me, in my opinion, more soulful depth that I like in the music. And this is just, we're just talking about one tradition of drumming. If you go to different places, like if you go to Bamako, which is the capital of Mali, and you hear a type of drumming there, and you go to Conakry in Guinea, which is the capital of Guinea, it's not going to be the same. And then if you go to Ivory Coast, Abidjan, which is the capital of the Ivory Coast, you're going to hear a whole nother type of djembe drumming, and these are all djembe drums, right? So when we talk about the differences in the rhythm, sometimes it can be the same rhythm, but it's playing differently. Like for instance, if it's one major rhythm that many people play is soli, or they call it suku in Mali, which is an initiation for young boys. But if you hear that particular rhythm in Mali, you hear it in Guinea, you might not be able to distinguish it unless you know, like really this is called the sangba drum, like the very, it's a very distinct sound that may translate, but it's going to sound differently. It's going to sound different. So, and that's just in one tradition. And the same goes with bata. If you hear a lot of times when people open up and start playing bata, those are the drums at the bottom, where in Nigeria, the bata is played. And then also in Cuba and places in the Caribbean, if you hear something like Elegua, which is the deity that opens the door. If you hear Elegua in Nigeria and you hear Elegua in Cuba, it's going to be different. Even on the small island of Cuba, if you go to the Matanzas, like where Rich is talking about, his tradition is more gravitated towards the Matanzas. And if I'm not mistaken, Rich, the Matanza tradition is closer to like a Nigerian, like closer to the root of the African tradition. But then you have another tradition on the other side of the island, which is called, we like to say Havana, which is more flashy. Is it? I don't know. I don't want to talk too much about it. Rich could talk about it.
Well, I mean, or the one thing is that the conversation is, and it goes back to what you said. One is more simplistic than the other one. One has maybe, in the terms of the amount of playing that the players play, from Havana to Matanzas, Havana plays a lot more a lot more of the phrasing versus
Phrasing and
the
melodies.
yeah, right. And the matanzas keep it real simple, and it's
Right.
just less. It's almost less.
But
Less is good.
and that's the way we were taught. So in most of the things that we do, our teacher instilled in us, Kofi Jimirai, always taught us that less is more. And that it's not always about what's flashy, but what is like striking to the soul and to the spirit, And so, one phrase can make you cry. You don't need 50 phrases, but one phrase, like one specific phrase, and like that, we talked about Dr. Joby, one of my teachers, even another one of my teachers, Musa Tarawele from Mali. He can play one phrase and that one phrase over and over again, and the way he plays it, you don't want him to change it because that phrase is going to get stuck in your head and it's going to just be like, it's going to cause you to have these immense emotions, so
Yeah. So you're saying that there will be different rhythms, not only from region to region, but between Africa and the Caribbean, and then when you come to the US would be different as well, but it still goes back to the same type of music that people are identifying with as African heritage. Is that?
Yes.
All right. So then I will read you the last two questions. Eleanor asked the first one, which is, are any of the mask dances danced in churches, services, or mass? Are there any European churches in the Ivory Coast? And if so, who attends those churches? And she explains, I ask because many of our African and Caribbean locals separate the people, and some keep their ancestral or indigenous culture, and some go European or Christian all the way. Do you know if that separation exists in the Ivory Coast?
There's a lot. Let me read it again. Hold on. I'm looking at it.
It's
I see it. So what's
Tough.
interesting is if you're talking about if you're talking about the Caribbean, one of the things that happened in the Caribbean during enslavement is in order for many African people to continue to acknowledge some of their traditions, they were able to hide their traditions behind Catholicism or behind other types of Rich could also talk a lot about that. Like, so for instance, there are, like, if you talk about Elegua, there is a counterpart, a saint counterpart. What's the saint counterpart about, bro?
It's the child of Ochoa. It's like a little kid. It's a little kid. It's one of the saints. It's a Saint Ochoa. I think it's
right.
And it's a little kid.
Yeah, when you think about the saints in Catholicism, a lot of people in the Caribbean, the enslaved Africans saw a connectivity between those saints and their African deities, whether it be Shango or whether it be Elegua or Yemaya, and they were able to still acknowledge their African identity through Catholicism or through Christianity.
Also, they were able to remember some things about harvesting. Goes back to harvesting, remembering certain things, certain herbs and things that possibly might not have. They didn't readily know that was on the island or in these places. They had some type of memory because those particular people who are initiated in those particular things have to know the sciences. So it became almost like a blood memory for certain ethnic groups that were brought into the Caribbean to figure out how to make mint tea. If they couldn't find mint, they knew how to do it. They knew it from those initiations and stuff like that. So that was also another thing.
Right. I can't really, like, I'm thinking. I don't know if I can really speak for the Ivory Coast in terms of what they do in their churches and how they acknowledge masquerade traditions in their churches. But I have seen in Mali, now Mali is not a Christian country. They're Muslim, like 90% Muslim, or practice Islam. But I do see that many people who practice Islam practice their traditional belief systems as well, right? They might not always do it where you can see it, but it's not like many of them don't, but there are some that will continue to practice certain belief systems as it relates to their tradition, whether it be the doso, which are the hunters, or whether it be you
The
know,
griots too.
the griots, yeah, the griots or the jelly.
The ones that play the kora, they have
Right.
the same type of situation where they have a juxtaposition on
Right.
putting the certain prayers and stuff inside the kora, inside the calabash. When they build it, they put prayers and things inside.
Right.
To
There's a spirituality, there's an African spirituality connected to the jelly that outside of Islam, right? So they and they will still practice both. But like in terms of, I would suspect that yes, it does exist in the Ivory Coast, but I don't want to say for sure.
It could be because what you're saying is it seems that regardless whether it would be Christianity or Islam, the indigenous belief systems and traditions can be either coexisting in parallel or incorporated in some parts into Christianity or Islam. And this is how they've been preserved till nowadays. And this is the case in most of the Caribbean communities, either coexisting or incorporated into Christianity. So, which makes the Caribbean culture so interesting. And it was, to me, it was interesting to know as to how this goes into the US. Are they, the masquerade, is it anyhow related to any churches or not at all?
No, I would say it's more. That's a hard one because that for me, for my research and different things and conversations, it's always seemed like it's more of a communal thing, a festival related to a festival or some type of event that everyone is there. It's more of a cultural thing, so to speak.
So it's separated.
Yeah, but they're not like saying don't do it or like don't go to the church. Like it's all a community together.
Right. And then,
yes, but people can do both, just at different times, different places.
And then there are some that don't do, but that just do, like have chosen not to do it at all and just indulge, do their Christianity or Islam. And then there are some places, like for instance, the Asara Set or some other spiritual, African spiritual spaces where it's only African spirituality and not dealing with what they might consider a European religious or Arabic religious, whatever, Islam or Christianity, period. They're not going to.
Right, would be the choice of the local community.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of different combinations.
I see. Very, very interesting. But that was an important question because this very interesting to compare how this situation is in Africa, in the Caribbean, and in the Americas.
And so, just one note that about Cuba and their relationship with Yoruba land is that during the Biafran War and like during some time of in the 60s, a lot of Yorubas abandoned a lot of tradition. A lot of stuff got destroyed, and the Cubans were the ones that actually had the Fernando Ortiz. You're probably familiar if you know that particular anthropologist. He was able to help preserve a lot, and then there was families who knew a lot, like stuff that even a generation didn't know or two generations didn't know, and the Nigerians had to go to Cuba to get that particular certain things.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Yes. So it's from Africa to the Caribbean and back to Africa.
Yeah.
From the Caribbean, yes. And I mean, we've noticed this in some musical genres as well, and in some other traditions, this reinforcement between Africa and the Caribbean and back and forth. This is really interesting. So let me ask you the last question before we move to wrapping up. Yolanda is asking two questions. How much interchange of rhythms is there in Africa between musicians?
Oh, wow.
And same thing, how much interchange is there in the US, in the Americas?
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead.
Another important question to
Yeah.
see
Yeah,
how
that,
the dynamics go.
let me, Ira mentioned a particular person by the name of Kevin Aziz White, who is a percussionist that lives currently in Washington, D.C., and he's from New York City. He studied underneath this particular person. His master teacher, his guru, his name was Laji Kamara. And this is just dealing with the djembe drum, the goblet drum to the left of the picture. And Laji had a very heavy impact on the African American community, but as well as Babatunde Olatunji. All of Babatunde Olatunji's albums has African Americans on it. Every last one of them. There's no Nigerians on there. Every last person is from United States between New York and Philadelphia. Even Art Blakey's on it. But the most important thing is that, this is just in my conversations with Baba Aziz, Les Ballet Africains, which is a national company from Guinea, which helped through Sekou Touré. He created this company to represent his country. At some point, there was an African American in that national company, and the company members told him not to talk, but he could play the djembe real good. So this conversation of African Americans and Africans combining together has been going on as long as even Catherine Dunham, if we talk about her, has been going on for that amount of time. And if it wasn't for those pioneers, that conversation wouldn't be happening. But now it's getting bigger, and musicians are really, really pushing a higher level of their cultural exchange. Go ahead, Ira.
I would say I'm glad to talking to my brother, because he always brings a whole nother way to look at it. I would have also mentioned, like, these are pioneers that broke down a lot of barriers. When we were coming up, it was like when we learned a rhythm, it was like on VHS, and we would play the VHS like 50 times, or we would meet, we would have teachers, and now I feel like today we have a bigger understanding of the traditional rhythm. We have a larger understanding. Now, there's some rhythms that are very heavily guarded, even still in the continent of Africa today, that are very sacred, that people are not going to play like at a performance. Mm-hmm. And there's some things that are done that are not, that we even do, that are not for performance, right? Because it's for our own spiritual house, but then there are some standard things that, going back to the question, whereas if I was to go to Washington, D.C., or if I was to play, in Chicago, my good friend Weedy Brahma, who's traveled to Mali a lot, when we play together, we understand each other. We have an understanding because we know the sound of that tradition, and we can relate to those sounds. And so there is an interchange of rhythms that happens in Africa and throughout the diaspora. I think one of the people that really helped to do this is Mama Decatur. So Mama Decatur, who was really is, we say is because we believe that people have transitioned, that their spirits are still here, but Mama Decatur was also a member of the Ballet National of Guinea, Joliba, And what he was able to do was to really help standardize certain rhythms. And we grew up on Mama Decatur. You know, Mama Decatur was able to help people with technique and sound and solo, and really took the djembe to another level for folks to really understand this is not an instrument you just beat and bang on, but there's a standard way in which in which he taught it. And so people across the world, you know, studied the djembe and studied that standard. And that was able to give us a foundation on the language. And so we can actually communicate with people in Japan who have studied djembe, people in Australia who study djembe. We all know what Minjani is. We know what Sunu is. We know what, you know, like all of these different rhythms, they all have specific sounds and parts. They can be played different ways, but they have similar characteristics.
And just to piggyback off what Ira said too, by us knowing these particular rhythms, be it on djembe, kungas, even with me with playing kora, it gives, as they say in West Africa and Mali and in Senegal, a jelly kunda, a house of musicians and artists. So this gives them, like, somebody calls up and says, "Hey, I'm a particular djembe player coming into Philadelphia or United States, and I play this style." We can have a whole conversation about the music. We're able to have a conversation, even if they don't know any English. We can have a conversation musically because the universal language is music,
Yeah.
right? Besides
Yeah.
love and food and math, right? So we can have, without, even when I went to Cuba, I knew how to play, and those guys were like, "Yo, come on and sit down." And then now we can go into debunking things that, or help me out on, or on things that I might have, my right hand is wrong, my left hand is right, but, and they're able to fix me up, you know, go tweak me up like the Tin Man, so to speak. And it's the same way, you know, the musicians have a way of coming internationally. They have a home, you know, because this is where it becomes a home situation. They have a place to go play. So that's the beauty about Philadelphia studios that we have, is that when the artists do come in, they can come in and they're not, and not to disrespect anybody, but come into a place where their language is being played. And better yet, they might have someone next to them that speaks the same language they do play, that they do speak.
Yes. I mean, how interesting. When this you're describing such an incredible dynamic of exchange of experiences, practices all over the world, and all that through this universal language of music, which is incredible, incredible. So we can expect perhaps some development of other rhythms in certain places, but maybe no development whatsoever when you're following more traditional pattern in more sacred environments. So it depends on how you use them and where, for what purpose. Actually, I just saw that we have one last question. Okay, the last question is kind of more general. How would one find more information? Sonia is asking. What would you recommend?
Yeah, I know on the slideshow we have Philadelphia. You can actually look, this summer we'll be doing some more things with Philadelphia. Yes, there it is, philadelphia.wordpress.com. You can email me at philadelphia@gmail.com, and Richard Robinson, he's a drum teacher 215@gmail.com. His Instagram is Electric Grill Lane.
Yeah, so you're suggesting that people get in touch with you and you can recommend
Yeah, you can definitely
different sources for them.
Yes. And then
Yeah. And meanwhile, I just wanted to mention to people before we end our conversation that most of the collection of Philadelphia is right now with me in the Folklife Center, because we're going to open an exhibition in the beginning of April. And if you want to come and see Ira and Richard in person, they will be here at Wheaton on April 6th. which is on a Saturday in the afternoon. And there will be some information that accompanies the displays, but Ira and Richard can talk to you in person about the masquerade. Everybody is invited. Do you want to say a few wrap-up words, and then we can turn it over to Marcy?
I just like to thank. I was gonna say thank everybody for coming on out, and thank Wheaton for hosting us in the event. It's been a ride, so to speak.
Oh, it was such an interesting conversation. Thank you so very much. We appreciate you coming to join us tonight and give this wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say thank you as well. And I'm looking at some of the awesome comments. We really appreciate you all listening and just being hopefully we can see you at the WheatonArts on April 6th. And
yeah, I see Sonia is coming. So I don't know who you are, Sonia, but I'll see you on April 6th.
Yes.
Well, that's very exciting. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you, Ira and Richard and Yvette. It's been a pleasure this evening, and thank you both for sharing your insights into your creative process. As we conclude, they've already mentioned that you can be in touch with them. And I encourage you to keep on learning about Richard and Ira by visiting their links and their Instagram. Their information is posted here, but you can also get in touch with Pamela or Yvette for more information.
Yeah.
And finally, I just want to let you know that the next Wheaton Conversation is with Mark Beretta and Kitty Lemaris. They'll be discussing their extensive research on European trick glasses, which culminated in their internationally acclaimed publication called Trick Glasses, Devious Drinking Devices. They'll join Wheaton on Thursday, April 18th at 6 p.m. Thank you again, and good night, all.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you.
you guys.
All right.